I welcome today Dr. Brian Blackwood from Colorado. He's actually from Boulder, Colorado, an orthopedic surgeon. And thank you for joining today.
Thanks for having me.
I came across you first on LinkedIn and noticed that you were bold and unafraid to speak your mind. And I'm always appreciative of people like that. And you've taken a couple of stands on some issues that I think are important issues, obviously. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. So, um, before we kind of dig into some of those positions, I'd love to just kind of understand a little bit of who you are. And so maybe kind of tell us your backstory and how you came to be an orthopedic surgeon.
Okay. I actually originally grew up in Montana. My dad's cousin was an orthopedic surgeon up in Montana, and I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do. But as a teenager or early teens, actually had knee surgery. Had my growth plate stapled back with the old hammer and the actual real staples, and was kind of impressed. Actually, only met that guy once, but it managed to straighten my legs out. And then return me back to the care of my uncle. And so that really kind of stuck with me that you could change someone's life with just a an hour-long procedure to really impact them long term. And so as I was kind of exploring what I wanted to do in life, I was kind of exploring architecture or journalism or engineering. I actually ended up in an anatomy and physiology class at Carroll College up in Helena, Montana, where I was playing football and was doing very well, but I really didn't know what my potential was until my teacher kind of pulled me aside and was like, I'm not sure if you're really applying yourself enough. you have some ability. I think if you put some effort into it, you can raise the bar on what you're thinking. I think I was maybe thinking about chiropractic at that point. And she sort of pushed me. He's like, you might be able to get into medical school and sort of explore that option. And I'd always kind of grown up working with my hands and working on the farm, coming down to Colorado, working my grandparents' farm, and my family in Montana had a farm, and so it was a lot of tinkering and helping out there. So I really like the idea of being able to use my hands to help people in a manner that it's a very brief interaction that we have with people, but we can have a dramatic impact in their lives, and that was kind of a really cool thing that got me excited about that.
And so how long have you been practicing orthopedics?
So I did graduated medical school 2006 and started residency in New Mexico, in Albuquerque at the University of New Mexico. So did my training there. A lot of trauma and crazy cases where there's two interstates that intersect, and you're the only level 1 trauma center for the entire state. So you get some crazy stuff that comes through there. And so then I started actually in practice after my fellowship, which was out in St. Helena, California, at what's called the Kuhn Joint Replacement Institute at the time, with Tom Kuhn and Adam Freethand. Trained with them for a fellowship, and then they wanted me to stick around and join the practice afterwards. So I stayed there for a year. Never quite felt like it was home as far as the Napa Valley aspect of things. And so an opportunity came up in Boulder. I decided to kind of explore that. And they didn't have a fellowship trained joint guy or joint person at that point. And so it was a really great opportunity for me to move there, start my own sort of practice. I was sort of hospital employed in California, or their version of it with the foundation model. And so to go to private practice and really kind of bet on myself in Colorado was appealing, kind of build my own thing. And it was great to sort of have the opportunity to do that. And it was where my ex-wife was from, and it was close to where my grandparents' farm was growing up. So it really felt more like home, even though I kind of joked that I tried to get back to Montana, but had to settle for Boulder. So,
Right. It's funny. You kind of fit two stereotypes for orthopedic surgeon. Number one, you're an athlete playing football in college, so that's kind of one. And the farm piece is just sort of like a intense work ethic, kind of mindset. That nobody else is there to do the work. You got to just roll your sleeves up and get after it.
and that was my grandfather. Also played football at Carroll College back before he tore his knee up, and he actually went on to be a dentist. And then because he was having too many kids, he just wanted to be a farmer in Montana and ended up in Colorado. as a dentist, and then got this sort of hobby farm. But he was up in the morning, the animals ate before we ate. He had to start work and get that stuff going. And then it was, fixing fences and hauling hay and getting everything ready to go. And there's no clock to check in. It's just when the work's done, the work's done. And on the farm, the work's never actually done. It just gets moved on to the next day.
That's right. That's right. Are you still doing any of those hobbies that you were doing before, or is work all consuming?
Work's fairly consuming. I'm trying to do better about hobbies, actually, especially lately. One of the posts I kind of mentioned was, kind of burnout and what that looks like. And so I was kind of falling into that trap myself, was just kind of constantly working and trying to hustle. And in addition to having a busy practice, doing a lot of consulting and sort of exploring and educating and doing a little bit of sort of mini development work in robotics and surgery. And was really passionate about trying to spread what I believed was this enabling technology that could help a lot of surgeons help their patients. But it, started to kind of wear on me a little bit. And so I kind of have taken a step back from the consulting stuff and focused on things that I enjoy. So trying to get out with the boys fishing more and trying to go out and play more golf and on a softball team and join a gym to go work out, a little bit more schedule that way. And between work and 5 kids and everything, it's a lot to kind of balance. So those kind of things have helped quite a bit.
Yeah, I honestly, 5 kids. I have 4 kids. They're all adults now, and we're onto that phase of grandkids. But five, I feel like 4 kids was stretching me to my max. So the fact that you have 5 kids and still manage a heavy load in career, that's pretty impressive.
It's a lot. We're going for 4, but then we got a surprise with identical twins at the end. So 4 turned into 5 real quick, and
Wow.
so it was a lot to kind of deal with what that looks like. But we've made some adjustments. It's tough. We don't have a lot of family around. We have some, but not some that are close. We don't have grandparents or anything. So we've sort of adopted a grandmotherly figure who's helped raise the younger 3 boys, and they call her Nan Nan, and she's been great for that. But yeah, to try to balance family and work and grow practice and be all that, it could be a little time consuming.
Yeah, for sure. So what are the ages of your kids?
From 15 to 6, the twins are 6.
Wow. So you're still in the heavy lift.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That's a lot. Yeah, wow. Um, well, so just if we can I love the idea of getting into some of that robotics discussion, but before we even do that, you mentioned burnout, and I know that's something that a lot of guys just deal with, and sounds like you sort of dealt with it and now have sort of established a good, some degree of balance. Maybe you could kind of speak to what you were going through at that time that sort of had you recenter around maybe what's important.
Yeah, I mean it's tough. There's a lot of demand on us. We have very high expectations of ourselves, and so we sort of expect perfection, which is an impossible sort of goal to do that. And then we're constantly pressured to produce and um, work hard, and there's just never-ending stream of patients that need our help, and so it's tough to figure out kind of where to draw that line. And I was probably had moments of training to be kind of a grumpy surgeon, or could be short with people, or wasn't really giving people my best face. And so I actually started by kind of getting a scribe, and that helped to offload things so I could actually interact with patients and not just kind of be worried about, I've got to have a bunch of notes I've got to do tonight. Kind of take control of the schedule a little bit, make sure I had days off built in there. I actually went and talked to somebody about it, and reached out to get some help to work with that with coaches and and kind of a therapist, and kind of look at what was motivating myself, and kind of how to deal with the idea that growing up as I did, there was a lot of pressure. There's like, oh, you just work yourself out of it. You just you put your head down and you grind, and good things will happen. And that's helpful for a while, but if all you do is put your nose to the grindstone, it's not a very enjoyable life. So I'd be able to take these breaks and to get out and get away. We went up to Montana and Yellowstone, Teton National Park last week, and just to enjoy being away. 2 years ago, I went up to Glacier, which even growing up in Montana, it was actually the first time I went up there going to the Sun Road. And it's just amazing up there. So to be able to sort of take a step back and really try to enjoy some of the things that I've already been able to accomplish in practice has been helpful. And then to set up an exercise routine and to sort of put up some boundaries on some things has helped, and to realize that we're all going to have patients that have bumps in the road, and doesn't necessarily reflect fully on us directly. It's how we address those and treat people as people, and not be worried about trying to be perfect all the time.
Yeah. How difficult was that to sort of come to the point where you sought help? Was that something that your wife helped you with, or what was kind of the reason that led you to that?
It's you kind of get to a point where it's like, hey, is this the person that I want to be? Is kind of a short, a little bit of a short fuse. Not super pleasant to be around somebody who doesn't enjoy not being at work, and to be able to kind of step back and reevaluate and say, hey, if I could use a little assistance and just kind of looking at what that is, and it takes a lot to do that. We're trained to be indestructible, and that there's no weakness, and that has its downsides. I mean, the guy that I actually replaced here in Boulder wasn't a fellowship guy, but did most of the joints at the practice I joined. The reason the position was open is he had committed suicide.
Oh,
A guy I interviewed with 10 years ago last year committed suicide. And he was like the most happy-go-lucky guy you could imagine. And there's been other people in the community. And the idea for sort of how many surgeons or how many physicians in general take that route, just because they
yeah.
feel like they can't ask for help. And so if there's any one person that hears this and says, hey, you know what, this big football playing farmer went to go get some help, I can do that too, then that'd be great.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things, it's almost taboo. Mental health is critical to performance at every level, whether it's personal or professional. And yet I think there is still a considerable stigma, whether it's real or imagined, that we're just, I think it is imagined largely because I don't think anybody would not support someone to really pursue health, and doing all that it takes to sort of get your mind centered around the right things at the right time. So um, I think that is something that occasionally you hear somebody talk about, but it's sort of forgotten in many respects. And I think it should be more of a centerpiece for discussion, especially for people who are in a very intense, demanding, just high pressure, high stakes kind of career, which clearly being a surgeon is.
No,
So,
it's kind of isolating. I mean, you don't have a whole lot of colleagues that you can kind of lean on, and that was one of the nice things about the consulting was there's a lot of people in similar situations that you could talk to, and then sort of understand on your level of what was going on, and develop friendships that way, outside of things where there's not the fear of competition in your area and trying to kind of lean on that and sort of always having that in the background. So, yeah, I think that's you're just expected to be perfect and to take care of others, and we sometimes forget to take care of ourselves in that aspect.
yeah. Yeah, I think we also believe probably a lie that needing help is a sign of weakness when I think it's acknowledging it and dealing with it is actually a tremendous strength to do that.
Oh, I fully agree. It's a tough leap to take that step and to look for some of that help, but I feel much better in where I'm at in my life and overall ability to help care for patients and to take care of the family and to be a better human being than I did, 2, 3 years ago. And so I think there's always room to kind of grow and improve, and to sort of limit yourself from those opportunities is short-sighted.
Well done. I mean, I'm really happy that you sort of came to that realization and took the steps necessary to get healthy from a mindset perspective. I think it pays dividends for you personally, professionally, for your family and your legacy. So kudos to you for that.
Thanks.
Well, so the reason again behind my reaching out to you is sort of some of your, I would say, bold statements, really. You don't you see surgeons on LinkedIn a lot of times posting cases, and, sometimes maybe it's, to get an attaboy from somebody, or maybe sometimes it's to get an opinion, what would you do kind of in this case? But you've taken a different approach than I think most surgeons, and it caught my eye. The one that was most recent that sort of triggered me to say, "Hey, I need to reach out to this guy and talk," was your comments about the whole rep scrubs scenario, and and it got a pretty robust kind of viral response, if you will. And so maybe you can kind of shed light on that. Not everybody's familiar with it. If you're not a rep in the room dealing with that, you probably don't know. You probably heard people gripe about it, but maybe you could provide the broader context of how it was introduced and what it means to you, what it means to an industry, what it means to your patients.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, the rep script thing really kind of blew up and kind of came out of nowhere. And this is sort of my starting out naive and not fully understanding what the situation was. We're a little buffered. We don't actually have rep scripts at any facility I work at. And so I didn't even know what the heck people were talking about when they were talking about it. But there's other facilities in the area where, the reps that I work with go to and have to deal with that. And so I'd seen sort of the red hats previously, but we even got rid of those at our facilities. So, at our place, the reps come in and they change in our locker rooms and they wear the same scrubs we do, and everybody knows who they are, and they still sign into whatever credentialing service it is at the facility. And so that's another thing. So I kind of always thought there was like one credentialing service, and it was just to kind of check a box and make sure you signed in, and then you signed out when you left, and then that was what you did. And then sort of digging into this and finding out more about it, and that there's places where you have to wear these terrible paper scrub things that were introduced under the guise of decreasing infection risk, and finding out that that's definitely not what they do. They do not impact infection risk at all. And they sort of track the reps throughout the entire hospital. And so there's people who they have the apps on their phone that are getting checked, and these people are getting harassed while they're getting a procedure done themselves, while they're seeing a doctor themselves, while their own child is being born because they're, not checked in and not in their rep scrubs. It's like, okay, well, there's there's other reasons to be at a hospital than work.
Right.
Sometimes the reps and medical sales professionals have to actually get care at these facilities. Shocking. And so just sort of the level of disrespect, like, hey, you guys need to look different. You need to be tracked. You need to stand out. We don't trust that you're able to wear scrubs in and out. I'm not opposed to the idea of credentialing and making sure everybody's doing things correctly. And I'm definitely not opposed to wearing clean scrubs in the OR, but I think it should go for everybody. I mean, you should come in civilian clothes, and you should change in the locker room, and you should go to the OR and do your work, and then you should change out of those and go back home in your civilian clothes. Like, it should be how everyone does it. And the idea that they're sort of signaling these people out and saying, hey, you're bad, you're a really big risk to this, and then finding out the cost, $140 just to be able to have the privilege to be a registrant with them, and then $9 a pop to buy these things at all the different accounts that they're at. And so some people are spending $100 a day on scrubs that normally would cost $3 for an actual nice pair of scrubs, under the guise that they're stealing the scrubs and that they're not changing into clean scrubs. And the assumption that they're evil was really just didn't sit well with me, because these guys and these ladies are members of the team. They're coming in. You can't do the cases without them. Like, they will not start a case if the rep's not there. That sort of makes them essential personnel. And it's not like there's random people coming in. The days of getting sold at the sink are gone. I mean, it's with these group purchasing organizations, and everything is decided well before you're in the case. So they're there to support, and their goal is to make sure that the case goes well so that the patient does well. And that's the reason they're in the OR. It's not to upsell. It's not to try to do anything underhanded. It's to try to make sure that the OR runs smoothly so that patients do well.
Yeah, no, I had my first exposure to it probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. I was at a hospital in Colorado at one of the Centura facilities, and I had to don the red cap. Now, we didn't have rep scrubs, but the red cap, and I was like, what is this? It's like, oh, so everybody knows you're a vendor. And it just had a weird sort of feeling and almost like a stigma attached to it. Like, wait a minute, I'm not part of the team. I'm not uh, welcome here. I'm sort of, third class citizen. It was a weird phenomenon. It didn't feel good at all.
No, I mean, it's like they picked red for the sort of scarlet letter. Like, hey, you're different. You're not one of us. You need to stand out so that we know who you are. And then it just gets taken to the nth degree with these rep scrubs and these paper scrubs that they do that, where these are professionals, and we see this in orthopedics. The patients are asleep when the reps are there, so they don't have that much interaction. But some have had cardiac sales reps reach out to me and say, hey, we're awake when the patients are awake and they're dealing with us and they're wondering why we're dressed like a clown. It totally unleashes any sort of professionalism that they have, because they have to wear these silly suits that no one else is forced to wear for protection of the patient, or sort of tracking them down. And it's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, it is odd, and it's definitely a change because I mean I came into the business working for Zimmer in the late '80s, and it was for the 10 years as a rep that I sold, I always felt like a peer. I felt valued. I felt appreciated. They were glad I was there. To your point, some people would wait to start a procedure until I was on site, um, because there was a level of expertise that they relied upon. And so to see it turn into what, to use your language, a kind of a clown show, it is thoroughly disrespectful. And I would grant to you that there's a lot of reps. They're not all the same. Some are more skilled and more experienced and probably bring more value than others. But to just have it sort of be this scarlet letter, I think that's the perfect description of kind of what it is and what it feels like. And so that's kind of the red cap, which probably should do away with. Maybe they should be white because they're the good guys.
Yeah,
Um,
no, you're coming in. I mean, the number of times that a rep has saved the day by knowing how to get something out, or which screw goes where, and how to do that, or to be like, oh no, like don't want to use this here. You want to set this up this way to help. And they're helping the scrub techs. The white cap would be much more appropriate than the red. The red
yeah.
mark.
Yeah, so touch on what is the justification for paper scrubs apart from being a profit center that is shared between the hospital and the manufacturer or the credentialer.
It's getting really deep. So I actually reached out, and they reached out to me to want to have a conversation about things, and
That
then
they
they kind of
did
fell
after
away
your
for a little while
posts.
until I posted all my questions and said they were dodging me, and then they came to the table and we had a conversation. But there's a lot of evasiveness. They wouldn't. I am a part owner of two surgery centers, and they wouldn't send me a contract. I'm like, well, maybe I want to use this in my facility. What, can I check this out? Like, but oh no, didn't want to share that. And any other vending machine, the way that the system works for you when you're buying stickers or Coke out of a machine is that they either get the place where you have the machine either gets a cut of the profits, or they pay you rent for that space. But they're denying that that's happening. That's just saying that they're saving them money. And on their website, it says, "Oh, this 900 bed hospital, we saved them $50,000," which I'm pretty sure you can find in the couch cushions of the CEO, if you look hard enough. Then saying that they're saving on scrub loss, which is just crazy. Now, if they said that their employee, the scrubs employees, refill the bins, and it turns out that's not the case. The actual hospital employees are refilling those machines or not refilling those machines in many instances. And then there's no reason that a hospital allowed their employees to fill machines if they weren't getting some sort of benefit from it.
Yeah,
So
well,
you stack that on top of their now relationship with GHX or Green Security, where now, in addition to having to be vendor credentialed with that company, you have to have your rep scrubs, and so you're wearing two badges on top of everything to make sure that you checked in with these scrubs on. It's so demeaning.
yeah. I mean, I confess, as a rep for 10 years, I must have had 4 or 5 pair of scrubs at home, that just, you're late at night after a trauma case and you're exhausted. You just grab your clothes out of the locker and head home, and they don't find their way back. But I'm sure there's a better way, maybe putting a bin for and just encourage people, hey, if you've got these at home, bring them back, throw them in the bin here. Just try to get a little bit of cooperation and treat people like adults rather than treating them like criminals.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I'll admit, as a med student, I had a stack of scrubs too. Like, and and I would bring them home at the end. Bring them back to the end of the day at the facility, and be like, okay, I got to get rid of this. It's just getting ridiculous. I gotta bring these things back and do that. And so I think people would do that. And like I said, in general, I think people should change in to do stuff and change out. But I understand that may not happen. But these are not $100 designer
Right.
scrubs that are walking out the door. These are $5, run of the mill, multiply laundered things that can easily be returned or brought back.
Yeah.
And in New Mexico, they had like a machine where you just punch in a code and you had 3 scrubs that you could get. And so you like, would return them and they'd give you, that number would go back up and then you could take it back out. And so there are solutions that are much better, that are being forced with this rep scrub sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the sort of the normal situation I can remember was that the only ones they had available were triple XL. So those wouldn't do you any good anywhere else.
No, I wouldn't think so. And I mean, I actually had the guys give me a pair from the other facility where they work so I could try them on and use them in a case. And, I'm a pretty big guy at 6'2", and they had found larges, and I was swimming in that thing. So I can only imagine, they're ill fitting, especially for female sales reps. They're, very ill fitting. They tear easily. They're in no way, shape, or form helping to prevent infections. And they're just sort of signaling people out, be like, oh, and then the fact that it says void in the middle of your chest, which again, for female reps is, brings a lot of unwanted attention to be like, oh, or is your script turned void or not? Like, it's not a healthy thing to bring into the
So
environment that
so
way.
wait, I didn't know this part. What does it say across the chest?
So there's where your tag goes in the middle over here. After 8 hours, it expires. So you have to go get another pair. So,
Wow.
if I'm doing, say, 12 surgeries and it's getting into the 12th hour of surgery day, then, I don't change my scrubs. The only time I change my scrubs is if it's a hard case and I sweat, or if there's some weird splash of blood that comes out. I'm like, all right, I got to change this and do that. But that's quick. Otherwise, nobody's checking to see when I change my scrubs or doing that. And I'm the one who's absolutely closest to the patient and at the highest risk for introducing infection. But if you actually look at what the highest risk and greatest source for infection is, it's the patient themselves. That's where the infections come from. So it is not coming from reps who are standing in the back corner of the room, keep making sure everything's going well and opening the boxes.
Well, I'm sure that they've got some data to support this claim, right?
They've given up on the claim. So I actually asked them, and they said they no longer claim that it reduces infection. So they have pivoted from that, from being an infection reduction company, which I think there was actually an Orthopedics This Week thing 2, 3 years ago that said that was what their claim was. And now they pivoted away to sort of being like FedEx trackers to make sure they know where you are everywhere in the hospital. And it becomes ridiculous. Like, it's one thing that maybe you could justify for the OR, but apparently they'll also, if you're dropping off trays for the next day's case, they want you to change into those. If you're picking up the trays, they want you to change into those. So there's definitely a reason that they want you to change into these things, and start that $10 a pop, running. And they kind of sell it that, oh, there's these big, huge billion-dollar companies, Stryker, Zimmer, J&J, that are footing the bill for this. When the majority of reps are 1099,
That's right.
small distributors. This is not a small fee for them to have to pay. That really adds up when you spread it out over multiple different instances.
Yeah, and when you have like, two or three different credentialing companies and you have to be credentialed by all of them, I mean, it racks up. And, there's a pretty broad spectrum of reps. There's reps that, are on a modest salary and those that have been at it for 25 years and they do better. But it's not just an all size, every size is the same, one size fits all kind of scenario. So I'm intrigued, and I appreciate, and I know that a lot of people in this, on the industry side, which are very much partners to the surgeons, really appreciate the stand that you took in support of the dignity of their case and their cause. And so I think that it's going to be interesting to see what happens over time, because I think bad ideas should go away. They shouldn't just continue. When like they've changed their claims. I think maybe they should take a better look at this. Maybe it's not a reasonable way to exploit a partner that helps deliver a high quality patient experience.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's, this is hopefully going to stir some conversation and hopefully educate some surgeons. I mean, I think surgeon education is going to be the biggest push of this, because that material is made of the same things for the blue wraps and the bunny suits. And so, I wouldn't let a person come into my OR in a bunny suit. So I surely would not let them come into my OR in a rep scrubs and think that that's doing anything to help. Especially when they don't care what's underneath the red scrubs. They let them wear whatever. And so that's not a helpful scenario either.
Yeah.
And so I
I,
think it
I
needs to be reevaluated.
I saw that some people actually wear it over their clothes because they're so prone to tearing.
Yeah, especially a lot of the female reps that reached out said that, they're wearing their spandex workout clothes underneath and their sort of athleisure because they're worried that it's going to tear and it's going to expose things. Um, I did hear sort of the opposite story where someone saw how terrible the fabric was and was like, okay, well, I'm going to make everybody uncomfortable and wore sort of bright pink undergarments until they were like, okay, you're right. This is
That's
ridiculous.
that's
Please
one
leave it
way.
alone.
There's many
And they
ways
just
to
did not.
solve it, I guess. Oh, oh, that's good. Do you have any solutions, any suggestions to the companies that are doing this, the hospitals?
I mean, I think the big thing with these is there should be some reciprocity for these credentialing things. So it seems very convenient that different hospitals in the same geographic area have different credentialing companies so that, and the reps all go to these different hospitals. They don't go to just one facility. And sort of the excuse for that by the hospital is, oh, well, if you went to a different facility, you need to get credentialed there too. I was like, yeah, but I don't go to a different facility. Like I, can pick and choose where I go, whereas these sales professionals have to go where the business is, and so they have to sign up at these different things. So some level of reciprocity where okay, if you sign up for a company, then you're good, and everybody sort of has to respect that. And then to sort of go to the hospital materials managers and say, hey, this isn't what they think it is. It's not preventing an infection. It's only going to get passed back on to you when we raise our prices because we have to foot this cost somewhere. So this is not really going to save you money. And to have the surgeon support say, hey, we don't like these things in our ORs. This is not how we want to treat our partners, and this is not solving the problem you think it is. Having to sign in, yes, being credentialed, making sure you have your ducks in a row, yes, but doing it 6 times, that's absurd. Doing it
Yeah,
while wearing the carpet, the fabric from under your couch, not good.
yeah,
There's better ways to do this.
yeah. No, that's great. One of the other things that I picked up on as I was kind of reading through some of your posts, you seem to have a perspective or a pretty strong opinion about loyalty. Um, and so I'd like to just kind of double tap on that and understand what kind of where that comes from and what motivates you to state some of the things that you said, just about loyalty and where does that, what part of that, of the spectrum does that touch in terms of your career?
Yeah, I mean, and then I've had people say that I'm loyal to a fault on some things, but if you're in there and you're side by side working with somebody, a lot of this comes back to my sports background. Once you're a teammate, then you're part of the team, and whether it was baseball and you get brushed back and everybody kind of supports and has your back, or you're on the football field and somebody's putting cheap shots on your quarterback, and as an offensive lineman in college, you work together and you do it to protect everybody else so the ball moves. And so you're part of a team and you stay together and you defend each other. And so that's a lot of where that comes from. And are you referring to my Derek Jeter post, or are you referring to my?
There were a few different ones that addressed loyalty and quiet quitting and some of the other, perspectives on which just sort of demonstrate a particular interest in that quality or that, character quality.
I think it's a really important thing. I mean, this is if you're gonna be loyal to somebody or a company, or to have somebody come and they're going to show up every week to help you with your cases, then you need to return that for them and sort of stand up and defend them. And the idea that you can kind of put a lot of effort and sort of commitment into one thing, and then other people are like, oh, hey, no, we'll stay loyal, or say my reps go to a different company and I stay with the same company. There should be some sort of like appreciation for that. Like, okay, you're not just jumping around from company to company. Like, this is the way to go. But then you kind of feel bad, and you're loyal to the people who were on the ground with you and are on the front lines and doing things. So, loyalty, I think, is very important to be able to trust that when you're on that team, that you're going to be supported and people are going to have your back.
Yeah. No, I think I think it is a true character quality that, as our culture sort of evolves, is less and less appreciated. So it was one thing that stood out, that I wanted to ask you about.
Yeah,
Um,
it's definitely something that's going away in our society, unfortunately. And I think it's an
yeah.
important thing to be able to kind of stand there and support each other.
Yeah, I think there's obviously mutual value in loyalty, and but I think it's more speaks to who someone is rather than anything else, rather than, any other value. It's like, this is who you are. And so, loyal people are in short supply, I find. So I always appreciate when I can find one. Another subject that I thought was interesting, and you mentioned early, kind of in your intro, that you've taken a particular interest in, is that of robotics. And robotics is one of those areas that I think there's been a huge swell of interest. Obviously, technology's been advancing really rapidly. Certainly with the Mako kind of starting the whole story, and Stryker spending over $1.5 billion on that platform, and really, I would say they were proven right. I thought it was a bit of a stretch considering Stryker just bought Helmetica for 1.6 billion, which was actually a very profitable business before that. So, they were Mako was still losing like 25 million a quarter at the time they were acquired, but give Kevin Lobo his credit. He was had quite the vision, and it was proved to be a brilliant idea. But so you're someone that sort of, did you learn it in your training, or when did you sort of dive into the robotics world?
Yeah, I mean, robotics was a big part of my fellowship and my training out in California. Tom Kuhn was one of the first early people in Mako. And I think he had maybe the first Mako outside of Florida. He was good friends with Mark Roach, who helped kind of come up with all this idea and kind of push this product, starting with just the partial knee. So when I was using it initially, it was just the partial knee, and then we advanced up to the total hip, and then when they were getting the total knee going, they actually that's about the time Stryker purchased them, and then that sort of got the triathlon put on there, and then kind of moving forward that way. I think it has been a boon to Stryker to have that. I think that technology has a great role to help surgeons do better and understand more about what's going on in joints, and especially complex joints like the knee. Uh, but I do think there has been some misunderstanding about what goes on to that and how the cost is associated and where that cost goes, and how much value they're actually adding. It's tough to prove that a well done total knee is better than a well done total knee, but I think we all agree there are surgeons out there who may not do every knee a well done total knee. So when you're comparing these studies to high volume, excellent knee surgeons, and the robot is the same as them, that in my mind, that means basically anybody who goes in and trains and understands how to use the robotic system appropriately should be at that level. And the majority of joints done in this country are done by people with less than 100 per year. So the low volume surgeons are doing the majority of the cases. And so that is, it's tough for them to do that. And there's a wide variation between ceiling and floor. So if you can raise the floor significantly, that is helpful too. And it's tough to really, in our industry with knee replacements and how they function and work, to really raise the ceiling a whole lot. Although I do think that there are some studies showing better outcomes with robotics as opposed to without. But if you can really raise the floor and really narrow the band and have more satisfied patients and less revisions, I think that's really going to move the needle.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because I know that there's been I've followed a few of the different debates about the outcomes of a knee with and without a robot, and they're indistinguishable at large. But on orthopedics this week, I did recently see an article citing that, at least in a robotic total hip, there was a demonstrable reduction in opioid use with the use of a robot. And they're not sure exactly why that is, whether it's attributed to just less soft tissue disruption, but it was a marked difference that I think makes a significant argument for, it's a robotic use. Have you seen that in your practice?
Yeah, I mean, we're working actually with Andrew Wickline on his sort of, less pain, less swelling, trying to get less than 10 oxycodone. And, we've probably been ahead of the game on that with, direct anterior approach and robotics, and having patients barely take narcotic pain medicine, especially after hip replacements. And I think there's something to be said for that. There's a lot of studies showing that, the trend is much higher and the scores are much higher in robotics, even if they're not clinically significant because of the widespread. But hip is also a procedure that does very well. It's a very forgiving procedure until it's not. So until it starts to dislocate, until it fractures until the patient's leg length is too long or offset's not enough, or some of those different things. So then you're like, okay, I should have done better on this, because it is a procedure where people are largely happy just to have the pain gone. And then you look at function and some of these other things. And I think there's starting to show some benefit to being able to recreate the hip joint appropriately and retain the offset. And a well-done hip replacement is more than just 40-20 on the cup. It's where you put the cup. Is it too high? Is it lower medialized? Is it well fixed? And using a robot really makes that very simple and straightforward. It's almost too easy, because in the knee, you're making some adjustments and doing some of that during the case, since you're having some thinking. But all this is done pre-op. You figure out exactly where you want that cup to go. You map it out, you ream it, you put the cup in exactly where it's supposed to go, and then you put the stem in, and people are happy. And it's a relatively quick case. It's time neutral, if not even a little faster, since we've been doing that.
Yeah, no, that's fair. So what kind of emerging technology has your eye?
There's a lot of things that can still improve. So, the next level of things is sort of, pinless navigation and tracking, AI, and sort of how you can assess and really sort of have optimized plan suggestions for each individual patient. And then how you can objectively tension the soft tissue in a knee to know that that's the right tension for that particular person, and then how you want to put the implant in so that you can obtain that function afterwards. So I think there's definitely room to grow and things to get better. People's like, oh, this is like the iPhone 1. Maybe it's like the iPhone 6, but if you didn't use the iPhone 6, they wouldn't have the iPhone 16. So there's definitely room to go in there and make improvements and to do that. But you don't necessarily shouldn't badmouth the people who are using robotics, because I don't need a robot, which is another series of posts I did, which is usually the LinkedIn doctor's favorite phrase regarding robots is, I don't need one. But, if once you understand how to do that and how to tension appropriately, and that's the one objective measure still. So if we could get, or one subjective measure still, is how you tension the joint. Once we can get that objective data and know what the correct tension is for the ligaments, and then be able to optimize the implants to match up that ligament tension, I think that's going to really push things forward.
Yeah. No, I think there's, to your point, that the improvements are subtle and incremental, but improvement is improvement. I mean, and it seems worthy of exploration to me.
I think so. I mean, I think it's very exciting, and people like, oh, did you get bored doing 3 surgeries? I do partial knees, total knees, and total hips, and not really. I mean, every case is a little different. Every case makes me think a little bit, which is nice. And and at the end of the day, our patients are better and they're happy. And that's the great thing.
Yeah. So what distribution of cases do you do, ASC versus acute?
So we do maybe 40%, and that's growing in an ASC at this point. So our initial ASC, the contract didn't work out great for sort of Medicare patients, but our second ASC, it works out better. So we're able to do more patients that way. We're even sending more patients home the same day from the actual hospital themselves. And so the idea of having patients have to stay multiple days is going completely away. And I think the ASC is the future. And as we sort of get settled in our new place, I mean, more and more of the cases are going to be done in an ASC. That is definitely the future of joint replacement.
And are you comfortable with the footprint of the robots, in terms of an ASC? I know that's been a challenge, and it's been something people have been trying to figure out. So you've got the advent of smaller footprint platforms, open source, open, like Think Surgical and some of the other systems. But what's your thought process on how much sense does it make to have a robot dedicated to a particular brand of knee, and can you have multiple robots, and is the ASC the right setting for that? And do you use a robot in an ASC, or do you go freehand?
Yeah, be sure that we have robots at both of our ASCs. That makes sense if people are using it. So, you have somebody using it every day of the week to be able to get that going. You'd all be on sort of the same page as to either what company you're using, or, the idea of Think is interesting in some of those ideas where you can have open platform and you can have multiple different vendors for that. But, if everybody's on the same page, I think you can get a robot in. And there was pushback initially. We were trying to do this in 2018, 2019. When I kind of started this before the pandemic, and we actually had a robot at our first surgery center at the end of right installed at the beginning of 2020, so right before the pandemic.
Perfect timing.
So they loved me as I dropped this expensive robot in there. But you can do these growth value things and sort of kind of blend the cost of that into the implants and sort of the commitment moving forward. And it's not that many cases to be able to pay off that robot. And so you can have very affordable systems, and every company has that. So whatever your preferred company is, whether you want a Bellus or a Think or something like that, you can kind of work with the vendors to figure out how to get that appropriate Rosa, Mako, whatever your preference is. And we have had great success with that. I don't want to talk too much about money, but the distribution's doubled at the first surgery center after we started doing more joints there. And it's going to be successful at the second surgery center as well. So it can be financially beneficial to all the partners, and not be an albatross of a contract.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. So obviously the big topic a lot of people are concerned with, certainly on X and on all the social platforms, is kind of this whole healthcare conversation relative to physician reimbursement dwindling while administrators are increasing in numbers and in compensation, and so there's this sort of grifting, if you will, of looking at the dollar and how much of a dollar is actually goes to people who provide care to patients, versus the people who push paper and so forth. So I'd love to get your opinion. I know you won't be shy. Just tell me kind of what are your thoughts about where, I think the state, pretty much everybody understands the state, so we need to go into where we are today, but where do you see us going in the future? Is there any hope for the future to sort of get things in order, or what is your thought? I'm sure you have some musings.
Yeah, definitely. This is something, I'm kind of focus on and look. I mean, physicians and providers are 8% of our healthcare expenditures. That's what we get paid, 8% of what healthcare is. That's a fraction amount. And so when they're cutting our reimbursement and then raising the reimbursements for the hospitals or for the Medicare Advantage or some of these other sort of heavy lobby groups that are sort of influencing Congress and making their decisions, it's very disappointing. They're just expecting us to continue to work because we're good people and we want to help people, and that's why we got into this profession. And they think we don't understand business, and they think that healthcare is too complicated. We would understand that. I'm like, well, the human body's pretty complicated too, and we seem to understand that pretty well. So you can probably extrapolate a few things and figure this out. I'm a part owner in multiple different businesses, and no MBA, never taken a business class, no finance, nothing, and they all seem to be doing pretty well.
But you worked on a farm, so that qualifies you for all of that.
I worked at a farm. I worked at Radio Shack. They got a lot of good backgrounds to kind of to do this stuff. But that's the thing. So there needs to be a change. There needs to be a groundswell of support from physicians to understand that none of this works without us. We are the essential component of this, and the delivering healthcare is we're not going to get replaced by AI in spite of what people think. We can be augmented by that, and it can be helpful for some things, but it's not going to replace us and anytime soon, especially sort of the more procedural driven specialties. But primary cares and pediatrics and those also need to see their reimbursement go up. They shouldn't be dropping year over year. We in medicine are sort of ashamed that we make money doing this. And while the insurance companies and CEOs and C-suite are not ashamed about what they're making, they may not advertise it, but they don't seem to be ashamed to ask for their fair share for dealing with the complexities of healthcare administration. So we need to stop being ashamed, and the AMA should step up, and instead of trying to rearrange the deck chairs and the slices of a shrinking pie, we need to figure out how to grow that pie and figure out that we are the engine that drives all of healthcare, and we need to have a seat at the table rather than being on the menu. We need to be able to work together for the betterment of all of us so that we're not having our reimbursement consistently cut with the expectation we'll just make it up with volume. That's where that burnout comes from. That's not a sustainable solution. And so I don't want to become this place where we have to pay cash pay to take care of people. I like taking care of my older Medicare patients who have put their time in and are very grateful and happy that we can fix them. But they're also appalled at what we get paid for doing the procedure. They're stunned that we get 10% of what their cost is. We're not making money hand over fist on this without having the volume to go through there. And that risks burnout and sort of endangering patients. So I'm really hoping we can stimulate some conversation. There's some good dialogue starting on LinkedIn about trying to really stimulate that and get that moving and sort of sharing the idea that there's a ton of people who are, and you use grifting is the right word. They're grifting the system. They're pretending it's complex to make extra money off of things. The fact that United is so vertically integrated with Optum and how they're sort of paying themselves with multiple different things is disturbing. And I don't think that they should have that idea. We shouldn't be so focused on shareholders and should be focused on how we can help patients. And the doctors are the ones that do that.
Yeah, the downstream effect of what's going on is that fewer people are pursuing as a vocation to become a physician, and which I mean that is a really catastrophic sort of outcome, because the older that society gets, the fewer physicians there are to take care of them, and so you're starting to see it already with this abysmal healthcare system that we have called the Affordable Care Act, which is an oxymoron. I currently pay over $20,000 for a system I don't even use, because I don't want to go through the gatekeeper that's going to tell me whether or not I can or can't have some kind of procedure done. I just pay cash for everything, while paying $20,000+ a year for just because it's insurance. Like, it's catastrophic insurance, which I think describes it very well, because it is a catastrophe.
It is a catastrophe, and unfortunately, I had to learn this the hard way. So you know how you say, "Oh, you need insurance for if you get in a car accident or you have some health thing that comes up." Well, my daughter was hit by a car last fall and dropped walking through a crosswalk, and having to deal with the navigation of insurance and how much of them don't want to pay anything because, oh, well, she got hit by a car, that should be covered by the car insurance. It's like she went to a hospital, like she had to be airlifted to Children's at Denver, like she was in the ICU. This is a health issue, and this is literally why you tell people they should buy insurance. And there's something called subrogation, where they're going to try to get paid back from the guy who hit my daughter to make their shareholders more money. I mean, it's disturbing and disappointing, and a catastrophic system and a catastrophic.
How is your daughter doing?
Luckily, she's doing great. So she bounced back. She had some significant injuries, but she's been tough, and I think kids are made of rubber, luckily. But she's 95% back to where she was at, which has been fantastic.
Oh, good, good. Well, so yeah, I do think there are some conversations happening on X. You're seeing people like Dutch Rojas taking a really firm stance against this insanity, and I support him wholeheartedly. We have on Orthopedics This Week multiple times, and we're going to continue to amplify his voice, because it's an important message that needs to be heard, and not just heard and not ignored, but really, people need to activate, and not just physicians, but physicians do need to, because they do have clout. But I think just generally that our society needs to, out of purely a self-protection mode, fight for the physicians, that so that we don't have, they're not a dying breed, and we don't have enough filling the med schools and taking care of patients for the next generations.
No, I fully agree. I think Dutch has been a great advocate for physicians, and the more we educate the general public, I think there's just, similar to how I was naive on the rep script. I think there's public naivety to what's going on in healthcare and where those money's going, and so the more we can sort of advertise where their dollars are being spent, and is this how they think their dollars should be being spent. And this is a $5 trillion a year industry. I mean, it is ridiculous, the amount of money that's going in, and how little of it gets done for actual patient care and gets used for actual patient care.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. Well, what advice would you give to your peers to activate, to get involved, to beyond just complaining on LinkedIn, which has value, but limited value?
It was fun. You get to talk to interesting people, and you complain on LinkedIn, or to sort of advertise things. But I think if in your own community, look and educate yourself as to what's going on, and educate yourself on your own value, what you bring to the system, and don't try to minimize that. I mean, we bring tremendous value to the system, and I think that gets downplayed significantly by people who want to belittle us and say that we're not that important and that they were easily replaceable. physicians are not easily replaceable. We are not going to be replaced by AI in any time soon, and they're not just going to bring someone in quickly to replace you. So, to believe in yourself and your own value and to stand up for that.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So are there any other hot buttons that sort of grind your gears that you want to talk about today?
I think we've hit on quite a few of them. I mean, you got the robotics and the rep scrubs and the
Okay.
entire medical system. I mean, that covers a pretty broad
Okay.
swath of where what things that
Um,
could grind my gears. So we talked about my the ridiculous construction costs for home remodels, but I don't know if that's going to really.
oh my gosh. I just had a call with a buddy of mine who's the CEO of Apex Biologics who showed me a quote for windows. He lives in Florida where they had the hurricanes, two of them in 9 days. And he ended up getting a quote for four doors, like double doors, and I want to say 24 windows for $364,000. One double door at a discount, $24,965 for a double door.
It,
Nothing special.
it's amazing what and I understand that that just may be what it costs, and that's what the market's bearing, and that's what people have to do and have to pay. But and when you hear those numbers, and then you hear that your physician's getting paid $1,200, 600 of which goes 600 of which goes to overhead, and then 50% of that goes to taxes, and that you're getting $300 to get your joint replaced, and that's what their take home is. Where if we were to actually realize how much overhead costs and to take that into account, and how much value in our education is. The old joke about it, if it takes me 30 minutes because it took me 10 years to learn how to do it, you pay me for the 10 years, not the 30 minutes.
Right.
We've forgotten that in medicine, and we have overlooked that, and we're just been pigeonholed in that say to just be happy with what we have, and to ignore reality of economics and inflation and the increase in costs.
Well, the AMA has failed its constituents because that is their sole purpose is to lobby on behalf of the physicians and make sure, and really not just out of self-preservation, but for the good of our society. It's really a common good that physicians are incentivized properly and that they can make a livelihood that I mean is appropriate for the given skill set and the solutions that they bring. And I mean it is stunning, quite frankly. I just can't even believe it because there's such a misbalance or a mismatch of compensation with performance and with what is delivered. It's criminal, and I hope it changes. So I want to thank you for joining today, and just for the chance. I know you've got your kids there, and they're probably just like, "Dad, let's go fishing or whatever." But it's just so great to see you today, and appreciate your candor. And please continue to do what you're doing because it's making a difference. And you may not know, you may not feel it or sense it or see it, but little by little we chip away and we try to communicate things to enlighten people. So thank you again for your time today.
No, you're very welcome, and I appreciate that. I'm just trying to kind of bring whatever awareness we can to this to try to make it better. I love what I do for work. It's just there's a lot of headaches that are attached to that and ways we can improve it. We just have to buckle down and do that.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. I appreciate it a ton. So I won't keep you anymore, but have a great rest of your day and feel free to reach out to me anytime if you have anything interesting you want to talk about. You have a bully pulpit right here anytime you want it. And just as a thank you, I'm going to send you a 6-month free subscription to OTW.
Nice. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right, my friend. Well, God bless. Have a wonderful rest of your week.
All right. You too.
Take care.